The reason I think it's kind of important enough to kind of warrant its own section is because it's a very major shift in how humanity views the future. Do we see ourselves as a mortal race or a spacefaring immortal race in the long run? Do we see our relationship with mortality is a very interesting thing.
Well, I would just,
You
I
know,
think must have touched on it before at some point. But like, you just wouldn't use the word immortal because you can still die, just not of natural
so
causes.
sorry, yeah, yeah,
Is the
it's not from
difference?
age. You're
So
right.
long-lived, like exceptionally
Long lived.
long-lived
Yeah.
species.
Yes. That's your point.
So well, that's, I guess, transhumanism. I think that the field or group of people who are focused on these developments are
Right.
transhumanist. I think the issue more there is like, and how I think the point would make more sense to be framed is
Mm.
that if you are going down that path, then that is a potential path to ruin or doomsday of its own, and you definitely need to know that. And so the sort of monitoring function of that organization should be not to prevent us from improving in that direction and augmenting humans to become better through technology, because we have been doing that our whole history of civilization. It's
Yeah.
just that to make sure that it doesn't go wrong. And so,
Yes.
so it's about defining ways in which that could go, that attempt or that pathway can go wrong. And again, science fiction has myriad of examples of how something that looks like it would be an improvement would actually be more trouble than it's worth. So that's
I think
definable, and scientifically explorable.
absolutely. I think it definitely warrants its own group of people, to again start as volunteers, start as a public. I want these types of organizations to be as public as and transparent as possible. So it's not happening in closed rooms by big corporate, billionaires. That it's happening out in the open, and we all have a say in the future we want.
Yeah.
And I
That's
think
I think the
that,
word the key word there is open, because that would be
yeah,
all based on partially on what open source is. Like, you can do open education on the basis of the principles of open source, then you can do open anything on those
yeah,
same principles.
I'd love to have a simple poll to everyone in the world and to say, if you could cure aging, if you could take a pill and live an extra year, would you? Almost everyone would say yes. If you could take an extra pill and live an extra 100 years, would you? Most people would probably say yes. 1,000 years, would you? That's when people start to say, "Oh, I'm not sure. I want to live 1,000 years." But it's interesting when you start to think about, how much money should we invest as a society to prolong human life and quality human life. And we're not talking about, just as an old person. We're talking about having an extra 10, 20 of good years, young years, where you can do whatever you want. And vast majority of humans would agree that that's well worth investing in. So if we can kind of push that technology forward as quickly as possible so that people who are alive now can possibly live to 120, 150, 200 years in a good, really opportunistic or really wonderful way, let's just say. That's, I think, a good part of the vision of trying to connect this with all the purpose of why we want to do this. What is the real purpose of this organization? It's to extend human prosperity and life.
Yeah, it's just I was just starting to think about many other science fiction things. Like, just currently, the Foundation show by Isaac Asimov is ongoing, and that's exploring this very much question in many ways.
Yeah.
Because in that future, the human civilization, the galactic civilization, is made up mostly of normal biological, not augmented humans who live normal length lives, more or less. Because there was
Yeah.
a phase that was like much closer to our point in history, where there were many kinds of spacers, people who settled space, who were augmented in various different ways. And sort of idea of Isaac Asimov was that if they deviated too far from the human standard, that sort of their civilizations became unviable, meaning like
Mm.
they sort of lost vitality, or like the will to propagate or function properly. So
Yeah.
there's
Have
some like
purpose.
dangers to consider, because it very much depends, like you said, like, okay, is it extra 10 years, or is it extra 1,000, or is it just extra 10 years of being old, or is it just a fountain of youth where you wouldn't age until you die in an accident? Because I think this is totally valid area for sociological research, that, like, for
Yeah.
sure, like asking people those questions and trying to get some answers that could inform like economic policies, that's all well and good, because
Yeah.
clearly some improvement would be great. It's just a question of how much and of what kind, and what is the best way to get there. It's not that
Yeah.
the current state is the best state. I don't think that like most people would agree that it's completely fine already as it is, or fine. It might be fine, but that it couldn't be or shouldn't be any better. I think that that would be a
Yeah.
very hard point to argue. It's just that what people need to understand, and I think that's the another point, like again from Isaac Arthur and other techno futurists or optimists, is that the long lifespan is needed or necessary if we were to venture into space.
Mm.
Because colonization of space would need projects that take place on much longer timescales, meaning that you would have completely meaningful existence. You would just shift to a different scale of things because you would understand that I'm not just like, I don't know, building a house and it would take me a couple of years. I have a completely meaningful project, which is colonizing a planet, and it would take me 500. And you can be completely, I think, psychologically fine as a human in that situation because you wouldn't be sitting for 500 years watching TV. That's sort of the nature's way of like telling you should die. Is that like,
Yeah.
and that's
It,
all you are left doing. So in that sense, it's very much an open question. It should be an open debate, and
yeah.
some improvement will definitely be desirable and is possible. So yeah, that just all makes sense.
Yeah.
Just the caution
That's
that there
awesome.
always needs to be caution and not try to take quick shortcuts because that's where the
Absolutely.
problems in science fiction always appear.
Yeah. I just really like trying to again break it up into sections so we understand what we're talking about, and having that balance there. The balance is always key for all of these things. Understanding that we all want a little bit of fun, but we all also want some purpose. We want a project, and these types of things actually give us something to focus on in a post labor work world. You might get hundreds or millions of volunteers trying to think these things through and come up with better ideas on how to push humanity forward.
Yeah, that just
So
brings me to one of the points that I should have also maybe responded to is that I do 100% agree with you that it shouldn't be just a few rich dudes who are
yeah,
making all of these decisions just because they have all the money. That's bad,
exactly.
or
Yeah,
if not for many obvious reasons, it's bad because if it's just a few people, they will have just a few ideas without many
yeah,
checks, considering how good those ideas are, which is always the sort of contrast between an open approach like open source and closed approach like closed source is that the open approach must be better because more people, way more people are involved. And just because somebody has more money doesn't mean that proportionally, like if they have like a billion times more money, doesn't mean that their
yeah,
ideas are a billion times better. That's just not
exactly.
how anything works.